all had a very nice Christmas and enjoying this conversation. Today we're going to be talking about the Magi. Now, the story of the Magi is much treasured. It's from the Gospel of Matthew. And of late, there's a more recent tradition that calls the Magi kings, but Matthew calls them Magi, which M-A-G-O-I. And this is a word that could mean magician or wizard, or probably the best fit to describe that is astrologer. Now, the text doesn't contain any information about how many Magi traveled to see the new king, or whether they're men or women. So this idea of the three kings is a more recent idea because they weren't all men and there weren't three of them. There's thought there maybe were about 12 of them. So the three came from the gifts that they offered. The gifts they carried were gold, frankincense, and myrrh, as you probably know, and these all had a symbolic meaning. Gold was associated with monarchy and wealth and power. Frankincense, which was imported from a distant country, so it was very expensive. This was burned in worship rituals. And myrrh was a perfumed resin that was used by priests to anoint. So all these gifts were gifts fit for a king, and that is why the Magi brought them to Jesus' birth. So I'm going to read to you now the story of the Magi visiting Jesus. The Magi were not Jewish like Mary and Joseph and Jesus. They came from a country far away. They traveled to a place, the palace of King Herod in Jerusalem. They said, "We have been looking at the stars. We think the stars tell us a new ruler, the Messiah, has been born to the Jewish people. Where will we find this child?" Herod, the king of the Jewish people, was surprised. He was a very cruel person. He worried that someone might try to be king instead of him. So when Herod heard what the Magi were looking for, he was very afraid because he didn't want anyone to take his place as king. "Where do the prophets say that the Messiah will be born?" Herod asked his helpers. Herod's helpers looked in the sacred books and said, "In Bethlehem. That's what's written in the scriptures." So Herod talked to the Magi. "This Messiah is supposed to be born in Bethlehem. Why don't you go find this child? Then come back and tell me so I can bring some gifts too." Now, do you think that's what Herod was actually planning to do? Well, it wasn't. He was lying. He wanted to get rid of the baby so it couldn't grow up to be king. The Magi went to Bethlehem. They saw a very bright star in the sky. "That star is leading us," they said. "Look, it stopped moving. That must be the place where we will find the Messiah." That's how the Magi found Jesus. They gave Jesus some very nice gifts. There was shining gold, there was sweet-smelling incense, and a perfumed oil called myrrh. That star-filled night, one of the Magi had a dream. "Don't go back to Herod," the dream said. "Herod wants to kill the Messiah." So the Magi went back to their home by another way. Joseph also had a dream. In that dream, Joseph was told, "Run away, take Mary and Joseph to Egypt. Herod wants to kill Jesus." "Wake up, Mary," said Joseph. "We have to go. We have to run to Egypt." So in the middle of the dark, starry night, Mary and Joseph and their tiny baby started to walk to Egypt. And that is the story of the Magi. And sort of overshadowed a bit by Herod, though, King Herod. So what do you think he might have felt when he heard that the Magi had arrived in his palace? And what do you think? He was threatened by what they had to tell him. He felt threatened by his baby that might become king. So think about how Mary and Joseph might have felt when the Magi arrived at their door. And then later, when Mary felt when Joseph said they had to leave quickly for Egypt. Here she had just given birth in a manger of all things, and all of a sudden they had to run off to Egypt in order to save their baby's life. So it must have been quite the emotional and hectic time. But you'll notice the theme of this story is stars, right? That is how the Magi found Jesus. And by looking up to the sky. And these Magi, as I said at the beginning, they were magicians, wizards, you could call them. They were those who looked to the sky for their answers. So really the best way to describe them is astrologers, because they looked up and found their answers to various things in the sky, even though the sky was greatly unknown to them. So recently, a very exciting thing has happened in the world of astronomy and our skies today. And this was the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope. And I think it was launched, I can't remember the exact date because all the Christmas activity and everything, I sort of lost track, but it was somewhere around Christmas. I should have looked at the date. Oh, wait. Yeah, I don't know the exact date, but I'll have to look it up. But it's very exciting because if you haven't heard about it, this Webb Space Telescope is rather revolutionary and will be able to provide way more information than, say, the Hubble telescope has in the past. So it will observe from within our solar system the most distant observable galaxies in the entire universe. It's pretty amazing. And it has an infrared telescope that will explore a wide range of science questions to help us understand the origins of the universe and our place in it. It will directly observe parts of space and parts of time that we've never seen before. It will look into the time to when the very first stars and galaxy were formed over 13.5 billion years ago. That's crazy, right? So I could tell you lots more about it, but basically it's this really powerful tool that will help us understand the sky above us, because there's still so much, even though we've had a man walk on the moon, there's still much that we don't know about the stars and what is up in our skies in the universe. So why am I mentioning this? Well, there's it ties into the story of the Magi in some rather interesting ways, I think. So we're in the Christmas season, right? And kids are looking for Santa in the skies. And if you're looking up at the skies of the city, you might not see a whole lot other than bright lights. But in the country, and here in MDI, we're lucky that we get to see so many stars up in the sky. And it's quite the sight to behold. Now, at the time of the birth of Jesus, there were no city lights. And so the stars were really bright to see, because they're even like where we live now, this light pollution and on MDI, and we are not looking at the same brightness of the stars at the time of the birth of Jesus. They were even more impressive then, when there were no city lights to cloud the view of the stars. And because of this, stars held a special place in the hearts and minds of the people living then. They didn't really have an understanding of science as we know it today. So those who studied the stars were doing astrology, which of course is a bit different from what we call astronomy today. So we talked about the quote, three wise men, or the three kings that we now know were not men, or there's more of three of them, but they were astrologers. They studied the movement of the planets, which back then they called wandering stars, because the planets would change position relative to the relatively fixed background of the stars. And they studied other changes in the night sky. Now, when they saw the Bethlehem star, it could have been a supernova or another event, the merging of two neutron stars. And the astrologers at the time, the Magi, interpreted this as an announcement of an momentous occasion, in this case, the birth of Jesus. And today we know the night sky holds the secrets to many things that scientists still don't understand. So we have this technology. It's amazing that we have this technology to send this new Webb telescope into space that will look back into the beginning of time. But there's still so much we don't understand, just like the Magi back in Jesus's time, the nature of dark matter and dark energy. And dark matter and dark energy make up about 95% of the mass of the universe. And yet we know absolutely nothing about it. Even the smartest scientists we've got on Earth don't know what that is and what it's made up of, and don't know much about it. So there's still so little that we know. So really, even though we feel like we know a lot about the stars and our universe compared to the time of Jesus, but there's still so much we don't know. So if you could hibernate and wake up 1,000 years from now, you would probably find our current understanding of the universe is really quite primitive, just like the Magi, who could not have foreseen what we know now about astronomy. So I wanted to show you a little bit. I want to bring you to the website. Share my screen. If you want to check out more about the Webb telescope, there. You can do a Google search for, here's the website. It's www.jwst for James Webb Space Telescope .nasa.gov. I'll provide a link to this in the video YouTube description and in Facebook as well. So you could just click on it if you want to check it out more. So it has launched. And one of the things that I think is really cool is this link. I mean, there's lots of information about it and all sorts of you could want to know about it and more. But one of the things that I think is really cool is you can click on where is Webb? And let's see, it looks like it was 3 days since it launched. So I think it launched on Christmas. It might have actually launched on Christmas Day. And you can see it's moving because here's the distance from Earth, and it is currently 311,730, now 33 miles away from Earth. So here and here, you can see how far it's going to be going. So this is where it is compared to how far it's going to be going. So it's only at the beginning of its journey. And it's going to it sort of was made like this piece of origami. So everything was all bundled up, and different parts of it are going to sort of open up and fold out at different times. And right now is when the sun shield is unfolding. So check out this website. It's pretty cool. And it's amazing to think about, what the Magi studied back in Jesus's time, and what they knew when they were looking up the stars, but how much it still gripped them and intrigued them. And that way today, even though we still know so much, not very much, relatively speaking, about the universe, I think the Webb telescope is proof of how much the skies intrigue us just as much as they did on the night when Jesus was born. So that's all for today. Take care of yourselves, and if you can, someone else as well. And I'll see you next time.